Hi, everyone. I think it is 1:04. We definitely have a quorum, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Armini?
Present.
Judge Bacon? Ms. Bershey?
Present.
Mr. Callaway? Judge Blue? Mr. Dorico?
Present.
Attorney General Ford?
Okay, you're on.
Justice Hardesty?
Present. This is us right here.
Mr. Jackson?
Present.
Ms. McKay?
Present.
Mr. Solferino?
Here.
Ms. Welborn?
Here.
Assemblywoman Krasner? Senator Pickard?
Here.
Vice Chair Scheibel?
Here.
Chair Wynn?
Here.
We have 11 members present so far.
Are we the second one? Right here. Okay.
Did someone else just jump on? Is that what I heard?
This is Director Daniels, DOC.
Madam Secretary, did you call Director Daniels? I can't remember.
My apologies. I may have missed him, but I do have him on the roll call now. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that is a quorum, so I'm going to get this meeting started. I'm going to start with agenda item number 3, which is public comment. I'm going to remind all the public testimony presented under this by phone or written comment. Again, I would encourage anyone that is on the line waiting to be heard that you can always submit your comments in writing. And please don't feel compelled to read out your entire statement if you can just submit it in writing. I know that all of the members of this commission will read those items, but because of time considerations, I'm going to limit everyone to 2 minutes. Person may also have comments again submitted in writing, and that information is listed on the website. And I will ask broadcast to unmute the first caller on the line.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the caller with the last 3 digits of 085, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 085, press *6 to unmute yourself, and you may begin. All right, we will go to the next caller. Caller with the last 4 digits of 454. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last
Hello.
4 digits.
My name is Sarah, and my partner is incarcerated at Warm Springs Correctional Center, where the recent COVID outbreak began. I'm a member of Return Strong, Families United for Justice for the Incarcerated, and I am here today to talk about what this pandemic looks like through my loved one's eyes. My loved one has been incarcerated for 17 years. Prison is not new to him. When he finally was able to call me yesterday, after being in quarantine for 5 days, his words gave me chills. They terrified me. He told me he's been down for 17 years and he's never been afraid, but right now he's scared. I have heard him describe prison millions of times. This time he described a movie scene. Staff walking around in full hazmat suits, people afraid to eat anything from the kitchen because this outbreak started with culinary staff, and everyone is afraid of who may or may not have touched their food. I thought the separation due to incarceration was the worst it could be, missing my best friend and my partner. The separation has been difficult, and then COVID hit, and we lost visitation. I thought that was as bad as it could get. The NDOC kept saying that they had it under control and the numbers were relatively low, I think for a little while, we were deceived into thinking maybe they did have it under control. We were focused on when visiting would reopen, and now we're looking at will he make it out alive. Visiting wasn't the end of the separation because the quarantine now makes that even more. Now phone calls are almost non-existent. We sit waiting for the phone to ring, wondering if he's okay. Is he sick? Has he been exposed? Was that our last call? The feels for everyone hangs in the air. My husband has had serious medical issues, and NDOC has done nothing to help him. That was during the best of circumstances at NDOC. Do you ever think about what could happen under the worst circumstances? Because that's where we are now. NDOC has been silent. We need answers on to how this happened, real ones, and we need them now. Please help us.
Caller with the last three digits of 055. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 055. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Okay, hello. My name is Kelby Peeler, Kelby, last name Peeler. And I am reading a letter from Yannette, whose partner is incarcerated at Lovelock Correctional Center. And so I'll do that. Quote, hello, my name is Yannette, and my partner is currently incarcerated at Lovelock Correctional Center. I'm a member of Return Strong Families United for Justice for the Incarcerated. I am terrified with what is going on in the Nevada Department of Corrections. I'm scared for my loved one, who I have not seen in over 4 years. He was sentenced and sent to an adult prison as a 16 to 17-year-old and is supposed to come home next year. And in less than 6 months to now, we mysteriously go from 0 to 105 positive cases overnight. Here's my question. Last spring, when COVID started to break, there was a sentencing commission meeting, and the director was asked to provide a list of people who would qualify for early release. He always states that he doesn't have the authority to make that decision, but he does have the authority to make the list and provide it to the people who can make the decision. What happened? I heard something about him running a list and there being 0 people that would qualify for early release. Well, what about a juvenile offender who has 10 months to expiration and 5 months to his board? Rapid or early release has worked to reduce overall prison population, but Nevada somehow doesn't have enough, or doesn't even have one person eligible for that. And again, as we keep saying, who watches the police? Because something just doesn't make sense. We need to keep everybody accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the caller with the last three digits of 014, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 014, please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Right, we'll go to the next caller. Caller with the last three digits of 563. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Jenna, Jenna. Good afternoon. My name is Jenna, and my husband is incarcerated at High Desert State Prison. I'm a member of Return Strong Families United for Justice for the Incarcerated. And I'm here today to share our story and fear of the situation that my husband is in and the things he has been exposed to due to the negligence on the part of Nevada Department of Corrections during this pandemic. Just as the others you have and will hear from, the pandemic has made dealing with difficult situations unbearable. We all share the fear and anger and frustration that has become the reality since COVID hit. High Desert State Prison has been on rolling lockdowns for months, extended lockdowns, and while some of it comes with the territory of being incarcerated in a maximum security prison, a lot of it just didn't make sense. He was telling people they were COVID lockdowns, but no cases reported, or rumors, but no verification. It was as if they used COVID as an opportunity to inflict additional segregation, even when there wasn't a reason for it. I mean, why do they need to have 24-hour lockdowns for 2 to 3 days to perform COVID testing? Tests that somehow would never provide results for the people that were tested. There was no information given once they were tested. It finally just became the assumption that if it didn't get you moved, you must be negative. But that is a horrible way to live, just wondering and waiting. For my husband and our family, that waiting is even heavier because he already has pre-existing medical conditions with both his heart and his lungs, and there's a high risk for a bad outcome if he were ever to contract COVID. Yet NDOC has been reckless. The O's think it is a joke and take no precautions outside of their job to ensure that they are not getting exposed and passing the virus inside. Over Halloween weekend, there was a baseball game in Vegas with 2 full teams of correction officers playing each other. That was exactly 13 days ago. Since then, how many people have they potentially infected with their reckless behavior? He has been exposed to COVID by staff multiple times. Yes, we all want life to be normal again, but the reality is it isn't. And NDOC has a responsibility to our loved ones. Please help us find a way to keep them safe.
Thank you. Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 779 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Nicole, Nicole, a member of Return Strong. I'm calling today to express my concern over the COVID crisis within NDOC. We are all aware of the COVID outbreak at Warm Springs. While my husband is incarcerated with the NDOC system, he is not my only concern. Considering the rise in staff positivity and Nevada's climbing rate of transmission, coupled with the closed system such as the prison, the current situation being portrayed seems implausible. In fact, I would suspect that the issue at hand is much larger than is being said by NDOC. Warm Springs may just be the tip of the iceberg. Has anyone present seen the effects of COVID firsthand? I'll paint you a picture. I'm a prison wife and an ICU nurse working COVID ICU since this started. In these 8 months, I've seen more death than I want to mention, and I have seen even more suffer fates worse than death. The scariest I've seen is how fast this virus can kill. Previously, seemingly healthy individuals of all ages, even 20 years old, requiring some level of hospital care, but not in the ICU. Until it happens, sudden respiratory failure, severe hypoxia, and even while in the hospital, death. Some who do not die left with a multitude of other life-altering complications such as strokes, amputations, etc. This has happened to many with little to no medical history in a city hospital. Imagine being behind bars with non-treated or undertreated medical conditions that make you at higher risk of COVID complications and death. You not feel well, so you put in a kite. Will they see you soon? You don't know. You feel worse, but nothing. You ask again, but your request goes unanswered, and now you're having problems breathing, but you can't dial 911. You rely on others. But will they? And if someone does, emergency services are not close, will you be okay? Would it surprise you that some of those at Warm Springs are still waiting for their kites to be answered or be seen by medical, even after almost a week of quarantine, if not longer? It is very possible that the hypothetical situation I've just described could become a reality for some, not just at Warm Springs, but anywhere within these institutions. And honestly, it's not a matter of if, but when. Director Daniels has failed to keeping our loved ones safe. Do not allow this to continue to go on any further. Accountability, communication, and transparency are needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 746 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Charisse, Charrise. I'm a member of Return Strong, Families United for Justice for Incarcerated. I have a loved one incarcerated at Warm Springs Correctional Center. I am writing about how NDOC's handling COVID during this pandemic. My last call from my loved one before quarantine was Thursday evening. The last thing he said to me was, "I'll call you later tonight." That call never came. Friday, we woke up to the news that 93 inmates and 7 staff members tested positive for COVID. The feeling of helplessness, fear, and anger became overwhelming. Leading up to Thursday, he described things happening in there that were new and unusual and inconsistent. For instance, separating units for breakfast and yard time, but feeding them dinner together, crammed into the chow hall with people standing against the walls because there was not enough seats, and no opportunity for social distancing. Massive bed moves were being done within the prison up until the week of October 26th. New guys were still being brought into the facility, upwards of 60 guys in 1 week. index practices or catastrophe waiting to happen. For months, for months they have said it was under control and that they were only trying to protect them. Let me ask you, how would you feel not knowing if your loved one had COVID or not, or what their health status was? How do you think you would be able to handle the stress of waiting for that phone call to ring? My phone call finally came Tuesday afternoon, 5 days after being quarantined. He had 10 minutes to shower, make food, and call home. He started the phone call off with, "I'm pretty sure I have it. I'm still waiting on my test results." He told me he had been sick and had the COVID symptoms and had been waiting for 3 days for medical to respond to his request for simple ibuprofen. So they are quarantined, but no one is checking on them for symptoms or providing treatment or care. They locked down Thursday night, and that was it. He said he feels like he was put into a cell to die. He said it is a mess in there and no one knows what's going on, and it's just a feeling of panic. My terror turned to rage. My loved one has an out date and he deserves to make it to that date. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 771, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leslie Turner, LESLIETURNER. I'm with Plan Action, and I'll be brief because I really want to give space to families to speak. But I just wanted to ask if we could follow up with the Sentencing Commission actions that were brought forth in the spring. A bunch of us testified back then. We were asking for mitigating action to be taken to prevent what's happening right now in NDOC. And it was voted and it was passed that we were supposed to give recommendations to the governor, which never happened. And then a follow-up meeting, we were asked, or it was decided that we were supposed to find specific incarcerated people that could be eligible for release amidst the pandemic. So I'm just asking if this body, and I realize this is the ACAJ, it's not the same commission, but a lot of the same people are on this commission that are on the Sentencing Commission. So it would be great if we could follow back up with those recommendations and take a look at the population and figure out what people can get out amidst this outbreak that's happening right now, and hopefully save some lives in the process. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 650, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Feldman, and I am with the Innocence Project. That's FELDMAN. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm the State Campaigns Director for the Innocence Project, and we work with our local partners, the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center, on issues addressing wrongful convictions. And there are really 2 issues that I wanted to raise and ask the Commission to follow up on, and both are related to transparency, which is really being demanded in this moment of calls for racial justice and accountability in the criminal legal system. So the first is transparency around the use of jailhouse informants. This is an issue that was looked at by ACAJ in 2018. It was taken up by the Innocence Working Group, and the Nevada District Attorneys Association in response passed a requirement for all 16 offices to adopt policies on the use of jailhouse informants. But we still don't know which agencies have adopted policies and what they contain. So we're looking for legislation that would establish a consistent statewide practice about the tracking of jailhouse informants and requiring disclosure of specific evidence on these witnesses. Connecticut, Maryland, and Oklahoma have all established statewide tracking systems for prosecutors, and a number of states, including Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas, have laws that specify exactly which types of evidence, such as the deals and criminal histories of jailhouse informants, must be disclosed to the defense. And the second issue that is critical to preventing wrongful convictions is transparency around police disciplinary records. Right now, Nevada is one of 20 states where there's no public access to complaints against police officers and how departments resolve them. And furthermore, the Peace Officers Bill of Rights prohibits agencies from putting unsustained complaints into an officer's files. And the Las Vegas Metro Police Department reported in 2016 that only 6% of complaints were sustained. So it's really important to maintain files of all the complaints and to make them publicly accessible. It's critical information for fixing abuses that can lead to wrongful convictions, and also to ensure that judges and juries are aware if an officer who built a case has a history of lying or coercion or other conduct that can lead to injustice. So thank you again for your time. And that is the end of my testimony.
Caller with the last three digits of 037. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 037. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN, Advocates for the Inmates and the Innocent. We strongly support the work session recommendation number 11, applying AB 236 retroactively. I've provided this commission with the recent stories of the outbreak of COVID-19 at the Warm Springs Correctional Center. 93 inmates have tested positive, and it is unknown how many were appealing their conviction or how many other inmates within the NDLC will get it. During the June 11th meeting, Chair Wynn had mentioned about diving into some of the issues brought to the commission. I provided this commission a recommendation of factual innocence posthumously. I'm asking if a member or an individual legislator of this commission would use one of their bill draft requests for a recommendation. I've provided this commission with information from Mr. Ray Crone, who had been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death, only to be exonerated years later. Mr. Crone has asked you to allow the families of those who have passed away the opportunity to exonerate their names after death. I would like to touch on the story of a woman I am familiar with. She has always maintained her innocence for a murder she claims she did not commit and how the judicial system had failed her. She states, when the Nevada Supreme Court affirmed my conviction, I had to file a writ in federal court of appeals. The attorney for the state had to file multiple extensions with the court due to ADA Kirk Vittle's refusal or reluctance to hand over my case documents to the Nevada Attorney General's office. Meanwhile, the person who was doing my writ paperwork was no longer available to help me. I informed the court and asked the court to appoint me counsel. The court denied me, stating that my writ was so well done that I did not need counsel. When finally the state answered my appeal writ, I no longer had my paperwork because the prison had made me mail out all of my paperwork, as it was a fire hazard in my cell in the prison. The paperwork went to my husband, and he passed away of heart attack. Ultimately, the federal court dismissed my appeal with prejudice and allowed me to bring it back to court. I didn't know how to do it, so I couldn't do it. I let it go. It's been over 25 years since she was arrested for a crime she did not commit. Her children were taken away from her. They were put into foster care and separated. They are now adults and have reached out to TV shows in hopes that they will bring light to their mother's case. Her children were present in the home at the time of the crime, and they know that their mother is innocent. She is in her 60s and is not in good health. She, too, wants to exonerate her name, and her children and her grandchildren know that she is not a murderer. She realizes any chance to exonerate her name will probably not come while she is alive, but she would like to have her children clear her name even after death. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the caller with the last three digits of 130, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. All right, will the caller with the last 3 digits of 151, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Denise, and my husband is incarcerated in Nevada Department of Corrections, pending results of his appeal for a wrongful conviction. I am standing with Return Strong, Families United for Justice for the Incarcerated, to shine a light on what's been happening behind the walls at NDOC regarding their handling of COVID. There are laws that protect incarcerated people from unregulated solitary confinement and lockdown, because historically in this country, those means of control have inflicted serious trauma on the recipients. Under disciplinary circumstances in solitary confinement, a person is required to have 1 hour of yard time per every 24 hours. When a facility is locked down for security reasons, they are allowed out an hour every 72 hours. And even those circumstances have been proven to cause serious trauma and mental health issues when there is not a pandemic, in addition to the lockdown. Inconsistent lockdowns and quarantines are affecting their mental health. 24 hours a day in their cell, at times not coming out for days, no visits with loved ones for 8 months, and now the lack of ability to have phone calls could have prolonged repercussions on their mental health. This is equivocal to solitary confinement, even at greater lengths than those allowed for disciplinary segregation. Under COVID, we're going to implement the word quarantine for what's happening at Warm Springs and during transfers and court appearances. When NDOC attributes COVID as the reason, they then quarantine individuals and allow them out for 10 minutes to maximum 15 minutes per every random period. Sometimes it is 10 minutes per day, but Warm Springs just had people go for 5 days without being out of their cell. The question that we have is this policy humane? Is it legal? And is it appropriate? We say no to all three. First, they could maintain social distancing, give PPE, and allow more than 2 people out at the same time and maintain the same level of isolation that they currently do. Depending on the space, they could let 8 to 10 people out for normal tier time every day. I don't know the exact numbers, but NDOC is not even making sense with their policies. And because they are not accountable to anyone, they are allowed to cry COVID and no one questions them. Well, folks, it's time to question them so that they have oversight and accountability. As my comrades said before me, accountability, communication, and transparency. That is what NDOC owes the families and public that much.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 309, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
My name is Pam Pappas, P-A-M-P-A-P-P-A-S, and my son is incarcerated in the state of Nevada. I'm here with Return Strong Families regarding questions that we have regarding the inconsistencies surrounding COVID and the department's illogical policies that do little to keep anyone safe. According to NDOC's policies for COVID, they state that anyone entering a secured facility must wear a mask. This is not consistently happening, nor is it enforced. Director Daniels himself doesn't wear a mask and asks permission not to wear one. Is that appropriate? As leadership, he needs to wear one because if he's excused, other people feel they can be excused. For staff on the units, some do wear masks, some don't, and it's not consistently enforced. Our calls to wardens got little assistance, and we were told to have the inmate document the issue, and then they would review the cameras. That's their job. Around October 27th, there were photos on NDOC's Facebook that show senior officers in a training meeting that took place at Lovelock. There was no social distancing, and not all of those officers were wearing masks. The seating didn't allow for social distancing, and there was some type of training that required trainees to be in full contact with each other. Isn't it a coincidence that 9 days later, Warm Springs has so many cases of COVID and also 7 staff cases, which incidentally, as of Tuesday, November 10th, the staff cases still were not reflected on the state's DOH tracker. Correction officers, regardless of their personal beliefs, have an obligation to follow safety protocol inside and outside the prisons. Staff in beds, moves from jail and other facilities are the only two means of exposure. The department said they were going to limit transports and bed moves to emergency moves only. Nevertheless, people have been moved consistently since COVID hit, and that has never been true. Do we need to define the word emergency? And has anyone verified that the bed moves made were actually for a true emergency? NDOC has a bad practice of hiding everything under the guidance of security, under the guise of security. We want accountability. Nevada is light years behind other states in the way we treat our inmates and the scrutiny given to NDOC. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the caller with the last three digits of 499 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 499, please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. We'll move on to the next caller. Caller with the last three digits of 724. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
My name is Janie Stetson. I'm calling on behalf of Christy. Give me one moment to grab her statement. Okay. My name is Christy. My husband is incarcerated at Warm Springs Correctional Center, and I am here as an impacted family with Return Strong, Families United for Justice, to help shine a light on concerns that we have with NDOC and their handling of COVID during the pandemic, as well as to bring some light to questions and concerns we have for our loved ones. I understand that this may not be the biggest issue to all of you, but for us, finding a way to communicate with our loved one is what helps us hold it all together. Outside, we are already dealing with the stress of life without our husband, son, or girlfriend, or wife. When they go away, we do not get time with them. We also do time with them. It might be hard to understand, but our lives take on a different rhythm when they are gone. Then the pandemic hit, and outside, we had to learn to deal with the new normal, which is stressful and comes with its own struggles. But Director Daniels keeps saying that NDOC has it under control and how Nevada had such low numbers. And at Warm Springs, for the most part, we didn't see much evidence of a threat until last week, and now we are once again trying to adjust. But it is even worse now. Communication through email, we can email them, and they can go to a kiosk and read our emails. It's one of the fastest ways for us to get information to them. Now, since the outbreak, they are not allowed to touch the kiosk, which is also how they access all of their financial information, order store, and handle information overall. Phone calls are gone during quarantine. Technically, they can call, but when they are quarantined, NDOC is only letting them out of their cell 2 people at a time, 1 cell at a time for 10 minutes every 3 days. When they are out, that is when they have to use the microwave, prepare food, take a shower, and hopefully get to call home. They give us 2 free 30-minute calls a week, but people can only use a few minutes of them, so they are wasted. So far, they have been told they will not be able to order store during quarantine. So now they are locked in their cell 24 hours a day and can't order food. Trays are delivered. For breakfast, it's a scoop of oatmeal, some potatoes, and then a sack lunch with a sandwich for lunch and a tray for dinner. My husband and son say their food serving.
Testimony is at 2 minutes. You can submit the letter if you'd like.
Okay, I'll go ahead and submit that. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 779. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Hello.
Go ahead, caller.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, my name is Jody Hocking. First and foremost, My life partner and best friend is incarcerated at Southern Desert Correction Center. I'm also the founder of Return Strong Families United for Justice. And I'm here with other family members to express our concern and fear and outrage at how NDOC has been handling this pandemic with a shroud of secrecy. We're here today to call for accountability, communication, and transparency from NDOC. My comrades have done an amazing job bringing many of our concerns that we have to light, so I'd like to veer off from the COVID-specific conversation and talk directly about our concerns with leadership. Since Director Daniels has taken over the reins from Director Zarenda, he's driven an agency that is already light years behind other states in the way we treat incarcerated people. We become even more archaic. Since coming here, he hasn't really helped that situation. In the last 5 months, there have been at least 3 major changes and issues where he has made unilateral decisions without consulting the appropriate people. The closing of the camp at Ely, the implementation of a revision to AR 258 without the Board of Commissioners review or approval, and now numerous concerns in regard to how COVID is being handled. As family, friends, allies, and loved ones of incarcerated people in Nevada, we're standing in solidarity and pleading for your support and helping us to have a voice at the table. Many states have inmate councils on the inside and family councils on the outside, as well as an ombudsman to help navigate those systems. Yet, Director Daniels will not even entertain one conversation with us. Nevada has a director and administration that has repeatedly acted questionably and needs oversight. As we continue to call for accountability, communication, and transparency from NDOC, we need the support of those in the justice community. We want to help initiate that process. We'd like to invite Director Daniels, the wardens, and the medical director to a town hall that we're going to be holding with families on Tuesday, December 8th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You all are welcome to attend also. We're hoping for a place where we can ask our questions, get answers, and be able to move forward in a way that we have some assurance that our loved ones are going to survive their incarceration, because most of them do not have death sentences. Thank you.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 833 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Cindy. I'm a member of Return Strong Families United for Justice. My fiance is housed at Lovelock Correctional Center. Up until this past week, all units were intermingled. NDOC was pretty much business as usual and did little to protect our loved ones from possible exposure by staff members. They didn't require incarcerated people to wear PPE, and they were not given new masks regularly. We have been told that there are frequent shortages of hand sanitizer, and eventually there was no hand sanitizer because staff said people were abusing it. It seems like staff could potentially do something about consequences for people misusing hand sanitizer, but what do they do once our loved one dies? We have had questions regarding inconsistent policies that didn't make sense since the pandemic broke. Last week, Lovelock began bed moves to house people who work together into units together, assumedly to limit exposure to people that they do not regularly interact with and limit the possibility of exposure. That would have been a smart policy 8 months ago before COVID began to spread through our facilities. NDOC failed to be proactive and protect incarcerated people, our husbands and wives and brothers and sisters and daughters and sons, our loved ones, our families while they were in the care and custody of the state. Also, staff is not doing their part in protecting incarcerated people by wearing required PPE and taking their responsibility seriously. Staff are the only way that COVID enters the facilities, and their obligation to be responsible should expand to the hours they are off duty, since it directly impacts the safety of the population they supervise. Repeatedly, we hear stories of COs joking about masks and PPE and social distancing. Before this outbreak, we still had regular reports of staff at various facilities not wearing masks. We called to report it and were told inmates could report it to the warden. How is this their responsibility to report and enforce that? And then what? After they report, then they get retaliated against. We have been cut off from contact with our loved ones. We have been denied visits and promised safety, but we have suffered all the loss and none of the safety. I personally have been denied the right to marry my best friend, and NDOC has given him a potential death sentence. Thank you. By their lack of action and accountability. I am saddened and angry. This cannot be allowed to continue. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 846, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 846, you may begin.
Hello. Hello, I'm Adrian Lowry. It's ADRIAN LOWRY, calling with Return Strong regarding the COVID outbreak within NDOC. They state that all staff coming into contact with a positive or suspected case of COVID-19 are to be wearing N95s. Those who are incarcerated within NDOC are only possibly provided with a regular mask, and there are questions regarding their efficacy, how many are provided, and whether or not they are replaced in their frequency. The question about N95 use is a curious one. In order for N95s to be effective, they must be fit tested, as they are not one size fits all. There are many different styles, shapes, and sizes, and one must be fitted and tested using validation methods, or they're rendered ineffective. Even so, much as losing or gaining some weight, dental work, etc., could require you to be retested. As you may have seen, many NDOC correctional officers have large amounts of facial hair. That's 100% renders any N95 ineffective, and that is why male staff in hospitals have been required to keep their face clean shaven. This issue, coupled with lack of enforcement of their own mask policy, could be the reason why NDOC has such a large issue with COVID cases at this time. It certainly seems possible NDOC is continuously not following their own policies and procedures, not to mention those determined to be effective by the CDC and World Health Organization. Director Daniels has routinely been seen not wearing a mask. So who is responsible for enforcing these policies? Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Anne-Marie Brandt, I have provided you. I asked this commission to consider including into the work session the factual innocence posthumously recommendation that has been presented to you by Advocate Tanya Brown and the letter from exoneree Ray Crone, who was wrongfully convicted based on Nevada Senator Ray Rawson's testimony as an expert in bite marks. I have provided you with a case in which the courts can sometimes get the facts of the case simply wrong. The documents I have submitted for the public record is the testimony of Sparks Police Officer Stephen Asher. The documents demonstrate how incorrect information or lies can result in the innocent being convicted, and how when the courts do not review all of the record in its entirety, it results in delays and justice being served at the expense of the innocent. I am only pointing out one area in this case, but there were others as well. Stephen Asher testified on page 2 of the documents I gave you. He was laying down in the bushes. On page 3, marked page 38 of the document, he testified. I asked him what he was doing laying down in the area, and he stated to me that he needed a place to lay down to sleep and that he'd come there on a prior occasion. On cross-examination, Officer Asher's testimony does not reflect his previous testimony under direct examination. Question to Asher: walking toward Flaky Jake's, isn't it a fact that when you got over to the area of the bush that the reason Mr. Blank is laying down is because there's shotguns pointed in his face? Answer: at the time I arrived, there were no shotguns being pointed at him. There was a handgun. Question: oh, okay. And so he wasn't just napping there in the bushes? Answer: no, he was laying there with a cigarette burning. Question: okay, but the reason he was laying down is because it appeared that it was at someone's direction who had a gun, correct? Answer: yes. On the 6th and 7th page of the document is the Nevada Supreme Court's order erroneously discussing the defendant lurking in the bushes. It says, in conjunction with the other circumstantial evidence tending to show at the time, the defendant was apprehended lurking in the bushes, and he fit the general description of the perpetrator. On page 10 and 11 of the documents are closing arguments. The district attorney just told you in his closing arguments, my client was found lying in some bushes. It makes you think he is just some slob street person laying in the bushes out on Virginia Street. But when I asked Officer Asher the reason he was laying in the bushes is because somebody had a 45 in his face. Stand there and be normal, they say. Get down, sucker. And then he put a knee in his back and a knee against his neck. That kind of stuff. And he had 4 guns on him. So he wasn't just laying around in the bushes, ladies and gentlemen. He had been walking to the restaurant and the police officer spotted him and took him down. Now, words can be very dangerous. Don't you love the word lurking? He was lurking. Was there any testimony of that? Did they bring the sub shop guy in to say, yeah, I saw him and he was lurking around? On page 11 of the document starts Asher's testimony again. Defense counsel was right. The word lurking can be very dangerous when one does not read the entire record and only makes an inaccurate mention of it. I'm not here to try this case. I'm not asking you to. I'm here to point out when the courts get it wrong. The only person who suffers is an innocent person, even in death. Justice should not stop at one's death. Being wrongfully convicted is a tragedy, but dying in prison innocent is the ultimate miscarriage of justice. Amending the factual innocence bill to include posthumously would be the remedy I urge you to support. Thank you.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 085 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute and you may begin.
I'm Monica, Monica. I have a loved one incarcerated at Warm Springs Correctional Center. I'm also a member of Return Strong, Families United for Justice of Incarcerated. I've never done anything like this before, but the fear for my loved one's life has forced me to do something, so here I am. Prison is hard under normal circumstances, but after 15 years, you adjust to certain aspects of it. Chow halls, no privacy, bars, tier time. And if you aren't careful, prison will begin to wear you down, but there are things that make it easier. The connection with loved ones, being able to hear the voice of someone outside the gate that loves you and cares about you. Visits and being able to sit across and hold the hand of someone that loves you and look in their eyes and know that they care about you, even if reality day in and day out, that no one cares for you if you live or you die. You are just a number or a street name to everyone except your loved ones. That has been the hardest part of this pandemic, the loss of contact with our loved ones. As much as they need us, we rely on them. We are families, no more, no less than families where everyone is free. I think one of the things that no one seems to recognize is how deeply this impacts the mental and physical health of all of us. Dealing with the pandemic when you are free is challenging, but dealing with the pandemic when you are free, struggling, and your loved one is locked up in a facility with an active COVID outbreak, we went from 0 to 105 cases overnight with no notice. We lost contact with our loved ones. I haven't heard from mine in 6 days. How do I know if he's the one of the 105 that have tested positive? Is he sick? Is he in a cell with someone who is sick? My loved one goes up to parole in 4 years, and that might seem like a long time to the free world, but it's nothing to us unless he doesn't make it to his parole ward alive. This is horrific. Where's the accountability? Who holds NDOC and the state accountable for our loved ones' lives, for their physical and mental health? Who? Please help us get answers and find solutions, because obviously NDOC can't be trusted to do that.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 014 please state and spell your name for the record slowly? You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute and you may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 014, please press *6 to unmute and you may begin. I will move on. Caller with the last 3 digits of 177, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Teresa Yancey, Teresa, last name Yancey, Yancy. My loved one is incarcerated at Southern Desert Correctional Facility. He has been incarcerated for the past 38 years and has underlying medical illnesses such as heart disease, not to mention he is elderly and almost 60 years old. The facility has been on lockdown for months now, and I've always looked forward to hearing from him on a daily basis, but the phone calls are few and far between due to the lockdown. This pandemic is taking its toll on the incarcerated and families very harshly. The NDOC has not been able to properly manage the facility during this pandemic. My significant other is terrified of contracting the coronavirus and feels that the staff is not being properly quarantined, tested, or retested prior to coming to work. At this point, he's terrified of contracting this potentially deadly virus and wants the NDOC to perform more strenuous testing of staff because this is the way the virus is entering the facility. The staff is not properly wearing their masks. Please consider how you would feel if it were your family member who was terrified of living in such a cramped space with no true ability to social distance from others. We ask that the NDOC implement new policies and procedures to protect the Nevada inmates, and we also ask that you consider compassionate releases for inmates who are elderly with underlying illnesses because they are more susceptible to COVID-19 and their outcomes could potentially be deadly. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits of 779, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute and you may begin.
My name is Naomi, Naomi, and I am a loved one of an incarcerated at High Desert State Prison, and I'm here as a member of Return Strong Families United for Justice and the Incarcerated. I wish to address NDOC failures at attending to the people and the responsibility during this pandemic. My husband also has serious health issues and is a high risk for complications from COVID. I recently attended a meeting with Director Daniels, stated that inmates were getting transported for medical visits and receiving all medical care. I almost fell off my chair at the blatant lie. NDOC has failed my husband on regular monthly medical care. His required monthly blood tests have not been getting done, providing him with correct medication and adjusted for his symptoms. He's put in many emergency kites over the last 3 months and has spoken to the nurse who brings him his medication every evening. He got so ill and couldn't get any help, it made me sick to my stomach. Even he's losing faith in the department. It took us over 2 weeks of calls and emails for him to get any medical care taken. The medical help that has been going on within the prisons is beyond a joke. Now blaming COVID and treating them this way is unacceptable. I have heard from family members at Warm Springs that their loved ones have symptoms of COVID for 5 days and they don't even get checked on. They're not getting tested correctly. How do you justify this kind of medical treatment? Not even giving the human decency of a pain relief and treating the sick with seriously medical conditions, not for months. Throughout the pandemic, NDOC has refused to be open with the inmates and the families whose loved ones' lives depend on the department doing the right thing, doing a human thing. Time and time again, you hide behind press releases. We need truthful answers. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my concerns today.
Madam Chair, there are no other callers in the queue at this time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's patience. I know that there are very limited opportunities for people to provide their public comment. And so I know that this is one of those. So I appreciate everyone taking the time and listening to those comments. I'm going to move to agenda item number 4, the approval of the minutes from the meeting on September 30th, 2020. I'm assuming everyone had a chance to review those minutes from the last meeting, and I would entertain a motion for approval at this time.
Chair Nguyen, this is Holly Wellborn, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Art Jackson seconds.
Since we are operating in this virtual meeting space, I'm going to ask everyone to record their vote with either a yes or a no. Madam Secretary, will you please take a roll call vote?
Ms. Armini?
I am going to abstain because I wasn't present at the last meeting.
Judge Bateman?
Yes.
Ms. Berkey? Ms. Berkey? Judge Bluth? Mr. Callaway? Mr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Dorico?
Yes.
Attorney General Ford? Justice Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Solferino?
Yes.
Ms. Wellborn?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Krasner? Senator Pickard? Senator
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Scheibel?
Yes.
Chair Wynn?
Yes. And that motion passes. Thank you guys all so much for taking an opportunity to read those before this meeting. I'm going to move on to agenda item number 5, the report of the Subcommittee on Criminal Justice Information Sharing. The meeting was held on October 19th and prepared its final report to give to the full commission. I appreciate Chair McKay proceeding with this so quickly after forming this committee last meeting. So I will turn this over to her to present that report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow members of the Commission. I am Mindy McKay, Chair of the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice's Subcommittee on Criminal Justice Information Sharing. You all should have a copy of the subcommittee's report, which I will present in part, beginning on page 4. The subcommittee held one meeting on October 19th, 2020. At this meeting, the subcommittee addressed organizational tasks, received formal presentations from actors engaged in criminal justice information sharing, and robustly discussed recommendations to submit to the Advisory Commission. The subcommittee unanimously voted to elect Under Sheriff Robert Quick, Lander County Sheriff's Office, to serve as vice chair of the subcommittee. We also discussed proposed changes to the bylaws of the subcommittee and its working groups approved by the 2017-2018 subcommittee. The subcommittee unanimously voted to adopt the bylaws as discussed with the proposed changes. The presentations from actors engaged in criminal justice information sharing included presentations concerning the addition of new disposition codes, the activities of the Nevada Offense Code Working Group, the NCJIS modernization effort, and the implementation of the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. Madam Chair, in the interest of time, would you like me to skip the discussion summary and move directly to the recommendations, or would you like me to go ahead and provide a summary of the discussions, then move to the recommendations?
How about you move directly to the recommendations? I know that you had filed that report, and hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to review that.
You bet. Thank you. So the recommendations are on page 5. 6 recommendations were voted on. There are 2 recommendations to draft legislation, 1 recommendation to draft a letter, and 3 recommendations to include a policy statement in the final report of the Advisory Commission. Recommendations to draft the letter. Draft legislation to draft legislation. So number 1 is draft legislation to revise the sentencing structure set forth in Nevada Revised Statute 453.336 in order to eliminate sentencing discrepancies related to marijuana offenses created by Assembly Bill 236 passed in the 2019 legislative session. And if you would like to refer to Appendix A from the NOC Working Group, it's discussed further in that appendix. Draft legislation number 2 to expand the definition of record of criminal history pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 179A.070 to include the offense of vehicular manslaughter, punishable as a misdemeanor pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 484B as in boy, .657, in order to make the offense retainable for purposes of records of criminal history. Again, Appendix A references that in further detail. On page 6, now the recommendations to draft a letter to the governor and the legislature urging support for the necessity of the delegation of an estimated total of approximately $40 million from the state general fund over the next 2 biennium to be used for the NCGIS modernization effort. Appendix B discusses that further. The recommendations to include a policy statement include a policy statement in the final report of the Advisory Commission supporting the facilitation of integrated relationships for criminal justice information sharing between NCGIS and criminal justice agencies in order to promote the sharing and collection of statistical data for research related to recidivism of persons enrolled or previously enrolled in specialty court programs. The next one is to include a policy statement in the final report of the Advisory Commission supporting the Department of Public Safety's drafting, implementation, and maintenance of a standard technological specification to be used by all systems of criminal justice agencies that code criminal justice information in order to facilitate ease and uniformity in criminal justice information sharing and to ensure its accurate transmission. And lastly, include a policy statement in the final report of the Advisory Commission supporting the state's use of 12 new disposition codes in order to better reflect the final outcome of criminal arrest charges within our criminal history system. You can refer to Appendix C for more information regarding the disposition codes. Thank you to the members, the presenters, and LCB staff for participating in our subcommittee meeting. That concludes the subcommittee's final report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does anyone on this committee have any questions for Chair McKay regarding the documents that were uploaded, as well as any of her presentation here today or the recommendations that are in the work session document? And if you have something, I have a hard time seeing everyone, so feel free to just unmute yourself and ask questions. Okay. Without any questions, thank you, Chair McKay. I appreciate you guys taking the time and putting all that in, especially under such short notice. It was greatly appreciated. So I'm going to move on to agenda item number 6. It's our work session discussion and possible action for recommendations relating to that. I'm just going to start by saying that a lot of the work session documents at this time, the recommendations that's listed in that work session document, starting with number 5, number 6, number 7, number 11, and number 13. Want me to repeat that? I'm going to repeat it one more time, just so if anyone wants to write that down and they're keeping track of that. Number 5, 6, 7, 11, and 13. At this time, I'm going to actually remove those from the work session documentation. I think further discussion and review and discussions about that need to take place. And then that would leave us with the remaining items on the work session document. And I guess I could do this a couple of ways, depending on this committee and how much discussion you want on. I know some of them are pretty broad kind of, standards on there. So if you don't have an independent recollection of what they are referring to, I can, if people want to bring certain ones up for discussion, we can do that. Or if we're so inclined, I can put it on and we can vote on it as like a slate of recommendations.
Madam Chair, this is Justice Hardesty.
Yes, Justice Hardesty. Do you have some that you would like to further discuss?
Not yet.
Okay.
What I wanted to do is ask the chair if you intended to include or would consider adding to the work session document the 2 recommendations that were made by the Nevada Sentencing Commission. They are unanimous recommendations. They are technical corrections, and they are set forth in Executive Director Gonzalez's public comment to this agenda.
Can you refresh my memory as to what they are? Because I think I recall that some of them were somewhat incorporated in there, but if not, could you, I'm pulling up that document, but maybe you have it up sooner than.
I have it. The first is to amend NRS 176-01343 to remove data measures which no longer exist based on input from agencies. The commission is being asked to write reports regarding data measures that no longer exist. And subsection 1, paragraph F revises the requirements of the report where there are redundant or inconsistent requirements for the report required pursuant to subsection 11 of 176-0134. These are principally cleanup areas that were identified by the Sentencing Commission. The second item relates to NRS 176-014, provides specific qualifications for members appointed to the Nevada Local Justice Reinvestment Coordinating Council. This would assist governing bodies of each county in making their appointments to the Reinvestment Council. So it would be an amendment to the statute to set out qualifications for those members to be appointed. The Sentencing Commission did not specify what qualifications that should contain, but we would hope perhaps if these matters are considered by the legislature, they could take a look at these three topics and debate those during the course of the session.
I can tell you, Justice Hardesty, they weren't noticed as a part of our work session document on this thing. It doesn't mean that other individual legislators, I know that there are several that have been observing both the Sentencing Commission and its recommendations, as well as the ACAJ in doing that. As you know, the ACAJ doesn't have any bill draft requests, just we're making recommendations, and hopefully legislators that are on this commission, as well as those that are watching it and on various committees within the Senate and the Assembly, will take that up. I don't think that it is something that we can include right now just because of that notice requirements. But I think that there is a record in there, and I know that there are other legislators that are including some of the stuff that you had mentioned in some bills that will be forthcoming in the 81st session. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other comments or discussion? I can have LCB staff briefly explain the recommendations if people have any questions or have forgotten what they were in reference to.
Madam Chair, this is Mark Jackson.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Based on the removals of those 5, it leaves 13. I just would offer at this time that I have no objection and offer my support to the remaining 13 recommendations.
Is there any further discussion on that, or do I hear a motion to approve those?
Madam Chair, this is Senator Pickard. Just a quick question on 2 and 3. I'm generally resistant to removing authority from the courts to make determinations that they think are appropriate based on the facts of the case. So as we look at removing authority of the courts to determine levels of supervision for probationers and parolees, and then in 3 to remove the division's ability to make recommendations. Can you just remind me why these are, what's the purpose?
I can start with number 3, because I think that's the easiest. Previously, we had removed parole and probation would prepare something called a pre-sentence investigation report prior to sentencing. And we actually removed them making recommendations to the courts. And so there were some other areas where they were still making recommendations because it was still in there, but that was inconsistent with what we had already passed. So they shouldn't be making any recommendations anyway. It is completely in the discretion of the sentencing judge to be able to sentence people appropriately. So I think that's what it is. And I'm going to ask, is Nick on here? If I can ask him if he can just confirm that, and then I'll have him address section the number 2 as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Nick Anthony for the record. Yes, you're correct in that statute requires the division to use a tool, and this process was requested by the division to simply remove because it conflicts allowing the courts and others input into the process. So they asked for consistency and kind of a cleanup on both 2 and 3 to remove any conflicts there in statute.
Does that answer your question, Senator Pickard?
Yes, and as soon as he started talking about it, I did remember, actually, when you mentioned it, I did remember that 3 was a cleanup, but I don't remember any discussion about removing the authority of the courts to determine levels of supervision for probationers and parolees, particularly if a judge were to feel that that's that a deviation from some standard may be necessary under the circumstances. That just makes me nervous. We have a couple of judicial officers on the committee, though, so maybe they can weigh in. But I just don't remember why we were doing that.
This is Justice Hardesty. I shared Senator Pickard's concern. I think it's misstated. I asked the CJI to take a look at this issue, and my understanding was that this isn't a matter of removing authority of the courts. Rather, it's a issue about what the statute requires concerning risk assessment, supervision levels recommended to the court.
I'm just referring to my notes here. Just bear with me for a second. Maybe is there someone from parole and probation on? I know this was a recommendation that came from them, so. Nick, do you have anything further on yours with regards to like maybe more specificity on the sections that we're referring to in the NRS? I want to say it was like 213, like section 213.1078.
Madam Chair, my understanding is that statute already requires the Division of Parole and Probation to engage in a risk and needs assessment. So this was simply a recommendation from them that would remove duplicity in allowing the courts to also make that determination, and the parole board as well, because the division has already determined the risk threat of each offender already.
I think a way to fix this to alleviate any concerns that Justice Hardesty and Senator Pickard might have, or any other of the members of the commission, is to maybe, just clarify that that is the intent of that recommendation, is to clarify any inconsistencies between those two statutes that they've already been authorized to do. I think maybe the general nature of how we have phrased it in this section, the authority of courts and the State Board of Parole Commissioners to determine levels of supervision for parolees and probationers. I think it might be too vague. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I suspect, Madam Chair, that given if that's what we're saying, then number 2 needs to be rewritten because I understand risk assessments and the discussions there. That's been going on for some time. But the way this is written, it sounds like we're removing from the sentencing judge the ability to do what he thinks is necessary under the circumstances. And I just can't support that. I suspect, and Justice Hardesty will, I'm sure, defer on this question, but I think that were that to be appealed, that someone's sentencing, including the supervision levels, being set by a mechanical standard as opposed to the facts of the case, probably would raise some eyebrows. So if we want to rewrite that, great. Otherwise, I would just suggest we pull that, and then we can take care of that in the next session independently if we choose to.
Madam Chair, this is Chris Dorico with the Parole Board.
Wonderful. Yes?
So I've had some conversations with the division. I know they don't have anybody present here today, but from my recollection on this, it's having to do with if the parole board or the courts, let's say, indicate that they wanted someone supervised at an intensive level or enhanced level of supervision, when the risk assessment actually conducted, the NRAS by the division actually might come back as they are a low risk or a moderate risk. And so you're over supervised, could possibly, the court or the parole board could order somebody to quite possibly over supervise an individual, which the empirical data shows that that's not the best thing for successful supervision. So I think this all came about just so that we make sure the division could determine what the appropriate supervision level is for the use of the NRAS versus having someone else tell them something when it doesn't meet or it doesn't match up to the same thing. So we wouldn't want to supervise someone more severely when they didn't require it.
Do you know if you are required by statute to supervise people according to that risk assessment?
Well, at the parole board, we don't supervise anybody, but I know that they are, when they do that NRAS, they are supervising them according to the supervision level. Unless, for instance, the parole board, I'll just use us for an example, said we wanted someone to be supervised at a higher level, but then once again, we might be not doing a disservice by us ordering a higher level when they really should only be supervised at a lower level or vice versa.
Chairwoman?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the recommendation and I'm trying to match it up to NRS 213.1078. The terms that are used in the recommendation, I don't see in the statute anywhere. And I'm also having trouble with the idea that district court judges were using those terms ever, or maybe I'm trying to envision when this ever occurred. I understand what they're trying to say is they have to do this risk assessment and then they're going to, under the statute now, and then they're going to supervise based on the I don't know if it's a risk assessment or a needs analysis or whatever. But it seems like what they're saying is that may be contradict whatever a district court judge is ordering them to do. I'm trying to find the statute where it even gives authority to the district court judge to use those certain terms, and if those certain terms have any meaning in the first place. And I was kind of initially thinking this might be just kind of an old statute that needed to be cleaned up. But as I sit here right now, I can't even really match up where the disconnect is, because I don't remember in my experience district court judges using words that are in that recommendation, tying them to a particular statute, and then having this conflict. Are you and I on the same page as that? Because I can't quite make heads or tails out of that. Sometimes a probation officer on a revocation might come in and say, well, judge, we're going to reinstate him, but we want this level of supervision as part of the conditions. But maybe that's what we're talking about, but I've just never seen.
I see Vice Chair Scheibel has some input. Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with Judge Bateman that I can't think of many fact patterns that or procedural postures that would result in this particular conflict. The only one that comes to mind is some of the specialty courts, like in drug court, sometimes judge will order that somebody be on house arrest for the first month of drug court or put them on low-level monitoring when they first started mental health court or something like that. But it's always been my impression that they work pretty closely with the supervising agency to agree on what kind of supervision that person needs and get them the appropriate services, including supervision. But that's just another thought to maybe make this more or less complicated.
Well, I think the fact that we're having this conversation and that it's incredibly complicated, and I think we had different intent on what the language in there was. Our intention was, I think, to get rid of any kind of inconsistency between statute and like thing, and that obviously is not necessarily what this does. So I don't have a problem pulling this as well. I think obviously it needs further discussion. And I would encourage Pearl and Probation, if this is something that they are really concerned about, reach out to individual legislators to explain their case, and they might be able to make it in a better thing. But at this time, I feel comfortable taking that one out just because obviously the language as it is written and the language as it is contemplated are not what we intended.
Madam Chair, Mark Jackson. I agree with that. The issue is actually under subsection 7 of that statute, which references NRS 176A 450, because 176A 450 subsection 1 provides that by order duly entered, the court may impose and may at any time modify any condition of probation or suspension of sentence, where the purpose of the statute that is referenced in our material is that the PMP shall conduct that risk needs assessment at the time that the probationer comes under their supervision, or the parole board at the time that the parolee comes under their supervision. And at that point in time, to basically, conduct the supervision according to that risk and needs assessment. So you can see that there will be a potential for conflicts in that. So it does highlight the issue that was raised by the senator. And I think it is a good thing to pull that one. So I support the remaining 12.
And Madam Chair, I appreciate that. I didn't mean to throw a wrench in the works, but I appreciate you pulling that. I have a district court judge who's expecting me to log into a hearing in 4 minutes. So I'll just put on the record that I am in favor of the balance after removing 2 and the others that you mentioned. Thank you very much.
No problem. Do we have any other further discussion about the remaining listed items in the recommendations?
Madam Chair, this is Mindy.
Go ahead.
Thank you. On page 12, recommendation 14, I just want to clarify that when we say that we want to add to the record of criminal history definition, vehicular homicide, punishable as a misdemeanor for retainability purposes, that means that when it's retainable, we're able to place it on the person's record of criminal history. If it's not retainable, then it will not be placed on that record of criminal history, and therefore anyone requesting that person's record will never see that. So the purpose of us asking for that to be added to the definition is so that we can retain it on an actual record of criminal history. So I hope that clears up any confusion. Thank you.
It's my understanding from reading over your report that this is just one of those ones that for some reason was never incorporated, like DUIs and other types of misdemeanors are, but this one isn't. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you.
Do we have any other further discussion or questions or clarification on any of the other recommendations listed, with the exception of now 2, 5, 6, 7, 11, and 13? Do I hear a motion to accept those, or a motion to, what am I going to call this? A motion to vote on these recommendations?
I'll move to adopt the recommendations as a slate, as stated by the chair with the 6 exclusions.
And I'll second that.
And because we're on this virtual meeting space, I would ask the Madam Secretary to take a roll call vote for the slate.
Ms. Armini?
Yay.
Judge Bateman?
Yes.
Ms. Bershey?
Yes.
Judge Wood? Mr. Callaway? Mr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. DeRico?
Yes.
Attorney General Ford? Justice Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Soferino?
Yes.
Ms. Wellborn?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Krausner? Senator Pickard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Scheibel?
Yes.
And Chair Nguyen?
Yes. And with that motion and those recommendations pass. And at this time, where are we at? Everyone's patience. That leads us into our last public comment. I think we're going to take a 2-minute break, though, to allow people to call in during that time period. So if I can ask everyone to please remain patient. Like I said, I think this is such an important part of our process of openness and transparency, and I would encourage everyone to stay on. Maybe you could just let me know when you're ready to start those calls. We'll be ready to go.
Good to go, Chair.
Okay, we'll start public comment at this time. I'll remind everyone that public comment is limited to 2 minutes. I am timing everyone out of an abundance of appreciation for our time as well as fairness. And again, I would encourage anyone to submit anything that they have in writing, should it be longer than 2 minutes or they want to supplement their written test or their oral testimony. And I'll turn it over to broadcasting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. caller with the last 3 digits of 177. Please press *6 to unmute and slowly state and spell your name for the record. Oh, that caller left. Caller with the last 3 of 563. Please state and spell your name for the record. Press *6 to unmute. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 563. Please press *6 to unmute. Well, Madam Chair, those were the only 2 participants we had, and they are not, one left and one is not in meeting.
Okay. Well, thank everyone for attending this last and final meeting prior to the start of the 81st legislative session. And at this time, I would adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys.